Good morning. Thank you for coming, Dr. Sybert. And thank you for joining me here at the Confos, Pittsburgh Confos. And you are another from journalists. I think the past, for this year, I have only been interviewing or talking to journalists or publishers. So you're one of them.
Yeah, I will say I have never been a journalist proper. I'm in that weird liminal space I've hovered around journalism. And so I haven't had the actual on-the-ground experience, but by proxy with my parents and everyone around me, I basically can take the cred.
And you're also, now you're in the PMP, Pittsburgh Media Partnership, right? So it's a bunch of journalists and journalists adjacent like me. Mm-hmm. All right. So, were you native Pittsburghers, Pennsylvanians, or?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say native Pittsburgher unless I was, out of the state, out of the country, because I'm originally from around Mars, PA, which is about like 35 minutes away from the city, up north. So that's getting into Butler County. Half my family's from around that area and the other half's up in Butler, actually. And so, I went to Mars School District all the way through and, then went down to Pitt for college. And so I spent a lot of time in the city, but I wouldn't say born and from the
I'm showing my audience now the Mars, which is pretty close to the moon, Very funny.
Yes. And we have a satellite, like a flying saucer, in the middle of Mars. Yeah. And it's pretty neat. And I think NASA sometimes stops by for like a little alien UFO festival because it's a funny little landmark there.
Yeah. So this is 32 minutes from Pittsburgh as the traffic right now. So I think moon is right here near the airport, right? So.
Yeah, we used to play them sometimes in sports.
All right. Yeah, so here's Pittsburgh, everybody. And it's Pittsburgh. This is Mars. You have to go through several cities, 7 fields. And where do you live right now?
I'm in Shadyside.
Shadyside. Okay, let's see where.
Good old Shadyside.
So it's one of the 19 neighborhoods of Pittsburgh, and it's very prominent because you have UPMC, you have all this professional area, and East End is not considered Shadyside. It's something else, right?
I think it might. I think it counts, actually. I like I said, coming back to Pittsburgh, living here as an adult, I'm learning all the name vernaculars for neighborhoods and stuff, and I think it might count as East End, but maybe
it has that East Liberty separately.
Yes,
and then Shadyside.
Very close. It's like a 10-minute walk, at least from where we're at in Shadyside. We're right near the Walnut Stretch with all the expensive stores we can't go in, and some awesome restaurants.
Only Apple store in the area.
A Rolex, something I of course frequent a lot. Rolex.
All right. So, okay. You just came back from a Keystone News Summit. And can you let us know what is it and what are the key takeaways that you can share us? Yeah.
So the Keystone News Summit, it was the second convening of journalists, researchers, nonprofits, advocates, anyone who's passionate about journalism, particularly in PA, coming together from across the state in Hershey, where we had, 3 days worth of panels, workshops, discussions about, what everyone's doing in their own area of Pennsylvania, actually, and beyond, to support journalism, to make it more sustainable, to connect better with communities, and how can we sort of come together and build towards something bigger as a state. And so a big takeaway for me is I think there's been a lot of time, probably like over a decade spent of, building out these different initiatives, projects, and things like that, such as the PMP, in our own spots throughout the state. And now we're kind of ready to come together and build towards something bigger and think about what Pennsylvania can do, to support journalism on a larger scale. And so I know they launched the Keystone Local News Coalition, which is a new initiative to advocate for policy and do research around different policy-like initiatives that could support journalism and just the health of the information ecosystem across the state. So that was really exciting. And I think it just really shows that, journalism and those involved with the realm of journalism really are seeing these challenges as interconnected. We're not just competitives, or we're not just siloed in our own area of the state, but it really is not only like a state problem for everyone who's interested in information, democracy, stuff like that, communities, but it's, of course, a national and international, issue as well. And so I think this summit offers a way to, like I said, build towards something bigger, which is exciting.
Mm. So during the summit, do they mention, I'm sure they mentioned, but, what did they say about what the public or the communities currently want or really want out of media, out of journalism?
Yeah, there's a lot of different projects that were super focused on engaging communities, listening to them about what they want to see in the news, where they feel news or journalism has failed them or fallen short in different ways, and sort of building trust by having these environments where you can come and talk face to face with people who are producing news or giving out these informations and better represent communities. So that was a pretty central part of the Keystone News Summit, I feel. And yeah, there's also a lot of different work to be done, mapping. They call it mapping your ecosystem through press forward and things where, you're not just counting outlets, but you're sort of seeing all the different ways communities members are finding information. So it's not just news outlets, traditional legacy outlets. It's libraries. It's, posters on the street. It's at the bus station where there's, posters and things like that. And so there's a big push to sort of think beyond just traditional legacy news outlets and stuff like that, and think a little bit more broadly about how communities find information and how you can engage and build off that.
All right. So you mentioned about now the variety of informations that the public can, or actually already consume these days, and now you're saying that the media as an entity would like to also capture that as part of their offering, or?
I think it's more about, nowadays there's been, and even for a long time, depending on which communities you're talking to, a disconnect between the legacy news outlets and certain communities and different, and communities in general. And I think there is a push from folks who are entering this nonprofit realm related to journalism to not just stay in the old ways of journalism, kind of almost an ivory tower-esque, like we are the news and we are giving it to you from our our spot up in our offices and things, and really thinking more holistically and broadly about how communities get information, and maybe building off that, but also meeting audiences where they are, and just being a little bit more informed about how people actually consume information. I think that's a different sort of orientation than news outlets have had in the past. A lot of them, at least, not all, but a lot.
Thank you for admitting being in an ivory tower.
Yeah.
I think it's rare for me to listen.
We're literally in a tower right now, too. We're in one.
Right? So because sometimes, you're part of this, sometimes the way public sees the media sometimes are different from how the media sees themselves.
100%.
Right. So I think there's a disconnect. Right.
Oh, yes.
So it's great that you're working on that. So, okay. We're going to circle back to this journalistic stuff, right? But now I'm wondering, because I know that your parents were journalists, right? So you're pretty much a blue-blooded journalist here. You're born in that ecosystem.
Yes, I was born in a stack of newspapers.
Right. So how was your experience as a child? I'm just imagining the dining table conversation. How is it like?
Yeah. I mean, I am a child of two newspaper journalists. My mom was just retired as managing editor at the Butler Eagle. And my dad was at the Post-Gazette till 2020, 2021, working kind of like an evening night shift, depending on, the years. And so, growing up, I mean, to this day, even newspapers scattered everywhere, and they would be hoarded into stacks for a really long time throughout my house. And I would, Sunday comics, I would immediately run to the Sunday comics. And as I got older, I got really interested in, politics and history. And so there'd be a lot of discussions about that over the dinner table, or watching the news together and things like that. In middle school, I was really into, or maybe like middle school, early high school, really into coming home and watching CNN. Like the first thing I would do. There was an anchor on there I really liked, and I would just like watch her segment when I came home, which was maybe a little atypical looking back to some people my age. Grew up watching a lot of journalism movies. Probably the first movie my dad showed me was All the President's Men.
Of course.
Still a great film. R.I.P. Robert Redford. And yeah, I think being a parent of journalists made me a smarter person overall, because they were so informed, always learning in their job, and would have really intelligent, in-depth conversations about stuff they've learned or come across. And I like kind of soaked it up throughout my youth. And I think it kind of inspired me to, go to college, to grad school and stuff like that, because I've always been really curious and wanting to learn. I think it comes from them. Yeah.
Did you often have arguments with them? Probably you have a different
for sure.
opinions.
Yeah, of course.
Or just
I'm
not
feisty.
Not just because of your being oppositional as a teenager. But
yeah, I think so. We're a feisty group. My whole family overall, and so we're very boisterous. We talk a lot, and we have different views on certain things, of course. I think when I started, doing my grad work on journalism and stuff like that, maybe at first I would come in with certain perspectives as I was learning more and reading a lot of journalism studies research and things like that. But eventually I turned into thinking more about it as I really want to think about journalism as labor. I want to think about journalists as workers and precarious workers at that. And when I started talking more about that and leading that in my dissertation research, my parents were like, yeah, this resonates with me, because the first precarious workers in journalism I saw were my parents, right? I mean, overworked, underpaid, long hours, lots of stress, weird hours. Like for my dad, he would leave at work at 4, come home at 2. And so I think, it definitely informed my research trajectory. And we still have debates to this day about anything and everything under the sun.
Right. So certainly you could say that it impacted your childhood. You mentioned about the all-nighters, probably assignment, like your dad probably during the evening shift, evening news. And so I'm sure, and also, we have all been teenagers, right? It's all up and down. And did you ever say that, oh, I want to be like mommy and daddy when I grow up? or you're like, I would never, ever want to be like mommy and daddy. So
that's a funny question. I wanted to be a journalist for a while. I actually, when I was really young, I made a few issues of the J Gazette, because my name starts with a J for Jeanna. And I would like write these, I was like 7 or something, really young, write some crazy story like family crosses the street, because my family crossed a busy street at some point, or something ridiculous. And as I got older, I was always a strong writer. I loved writing. I wrote a couple articles here and there about going to the Twilight movie premiere for the Butler Eagle and stuff like that. But my parents always, they kind of didn't want me to be a journalist. That was basically their message overall, because it was hard work, maybe not super high paying work. And so, I didn't do the Pitt News when I was in college at Pitt. And high school, I didn't do any of the newspaper stuff. They did start a literary magazine, and my mom helped me paginate it with their programs from the Butler Eagle and stuff. It was a really good layout. And so, it was interesting. Like they weren't, if I did it, they would be supportive. Of course, they're always supportive, but it was definitely like, maybe don't do that.
Was it because of the hours and pay, or was it like?
I think it was that. I mean, most journalists you talk to, probably almost all, like, love the work. It's just how hard the work is.
Okay, sorry for the interruption. Somebody knocked on the door and we got mail. So it's a slow day. Because of the NFL draft. So I guess a lot of people just opted to work from home. So, all right. But now we're back. We're talking about the childhood experience as a child of journalists, how busy, and also how they impacted what you want to be, or who you are now, right? So, so you're saying that you're not really the practical journalist who goes out and look out for news, look out for stories, but you are into more administrative side or you're more into the academic side. So how do you see yourself?
Yeah, I would say that I really enjoy research. I basically, this job at the PMP that I've been in since the fall is my first step outside of academia, basically my entire life. So right after I graduated college at Pitt, I started my PhD program at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania in Philly. And, you know, as soon as I got there, I knew that I wanted to focus primarily on journalism. My advisor, her name is Barbie Zelizer. She's a really big scholar in sort of a cultural, historical view of journalism, in researching it in that way. And she became my advisor, like I said, and I've been pursuing this sort of research line of journalism for a while. And my research is qualitative and critical. I like to do sort of different discourse analysis about how people talk about journalism, how journalists talk about journalism, and what this sort of informs on the ground of, you know, what journalists do, how organizations operate, but also think about the sort of organizational economic pressures on journalists, particularly in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of textual analysis things and interviews with journalists and stuff. And so my passion really is I really do enjoy research on some level. I think that speaks to sort of growing up in a very curious, wanting to learn journalist environment. And, you know, now I have moved since a little bit less on the research track with the Pittsburgh Media Partnership and sort of translating those insights I've gathered so far into hopefully practical interventions and ideas with local journalists in the place I grew up in. And so it's been a really cool evolution in my career to be able to go from thinking a lot about journalism to doing a little bit more hands-on stuff with, the local media ecosystem.
So from the discipline or from the theory, is journalism a subset of communication, or how would you?
Yeah, for sure. Communication, it's a really broad field, and Annenberg took a super broad approach from it. I mean, it was everything from neuroscience and like political science stuff to like they were doing brain scans and things to journalism studies to, cover like research on protests and social movements and the internet and things like that and platforms. And so communication is a very, very broad discipline, and journalism studies, I would say, is one sort of sliver of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then look at your LinkedIn profile here, and look at the theses and your dissertation, and they're quite brave. You know, the first one is a symbol of our horrors in Aleppo, right? And you're referring to
Syria,
the
Syrian civil war.
And also you're mentioning about the picture of the boy in the ambulance, right? So why did you want to talk about that story?
Wow, yeah, that is a blast from the past, because I actually wrote about that photo starting in my last year of college. I wrote my senior thesis on it, and then eventually turned it into a book chapter. And yeah, I was just really compelled by that photo. The Syrian civil war was a huge news story in college for me. And I don't know, news photography, especially of crisis and, horrific things that happen has always been, unfortunately, something that it compels me on different levels. Like it's something that is shocking, historical, upsetting, but also there's so many things that go behind it. And the way that, in this case, a photo of something that was happening in Syria was presented in Western media, and the relationship of Western media to countries not in the West, and those sort of power dynamics at play, and what it means to show children who aren't white Western children in the media and in these crisis situations. I was really, interested in looking deeper into that. And so I thought my research was a little bit about how the US media talked about this image, this child, Omran Daknish, and, the Syrian civil war in general. And I'm by no means an expert in that conflict, but I think a lot of my research comes from personal experiences, and like being struck by that image made me do a whole senior thesis on it. And then I later on turned it to a book chapter. And and I'm really interested in those sort of dynamics around power and the way people talk about things in the news and otherwise.
Yeah, and talking about the news in America, I mean, I'm an immigrant, so I didn't grow up here. But the way I look at the media, and then we had gone through, several wars already, right? And I remember that people were talking, to end war, they wanted a picture just like how images turn the public's opinion about Vietnam War, for example, right? They're like, look, we need something that's really compelling and then consistent, and that will turn public against, I don't know, started protesting against government, so to stop the war or something. So when I look at your thesis, like, oh, okay. So it kind of relate to me of like how picture is important, and in addition to having the stories, right? So is that how? Is it actually, so how did you guys talk about it? And I don't know, in theory, like what is it? What is it, like something to do with the how to click and bait the brain? Like you get it, you bait the brain with the image, and then so people can read it. So how does it work? Theory wise.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because for news images and images like that have always compelled me. My advisor, she wrote a book that I read when I was doing the senior thesis called About to Die, which is a very compelling title, but it's about news photography of folks who are, at risk, dying, or who have died. And it's a really, really interesting book. And she does this sort of cultural, critical, historical look at, what compels us about these photos. And a lot of it is sort of shortcutting, something in our brain. Like, she doesn't do like a neurology sort of quantitative, like look like that. I'm sure there's stuff like that out there, but there's these cues that we see. There's this sort of like shortcuts that happen with these images that draw us in. And something I did actually in my senior thesis was take a sort of psychoanalytical look of it and use Julia Kristeva's theory of abjection. And so this idea of seeing something horrific, really bringing something out in us, something almost primal, where we realize that we ourselves are, of corporeal form, or bodies or matter that decays and dies. And it's sort of this jolt that happens when we see an image of something horrific. And so when news images capture these things, I think there's an instant emotional, pool of them that impacts a lot of people, not everyone, obviously. But yeah, there's something really interesting about it there. And I think looking at them as texts are very interesting, but thinking about all of the stuff behind it really compels me as well. Like the journalists who are taking these photos, who is shown, who is not, and how are they shown? And, where do these images go? I think there's a whole bunch that goes beyond just the picture itself.
Right. Interesting of how it's taken, how the journalists get that information that something's about to happen, and then how it's going to get transmitted, and then the process to do that, and then the editor has to pick which one and make the decision whether to publish certain image or not. And oh no, I don't know. I don't know if you're tracking the story that happened several years ago about the napalm girl.
Oh yes, right? Yes.
So there was a bunch of controversy. I actually watched like a Netflix and a YouTube video about it, like that controversy, right? It's like
what was that? Can you remind me of it? Because I read a lot about that photo, and sort of thinking about one of the controversial points maybe is like, what does it mean when a photographer just takes a photo of someone in like dying or in crisis or injured and just kind of moves forward from that? And there's a lot of questions at the time around, she's like nude, but she's a child. And like, can you publish that in the newspaper? That was a big like question at the time, even though showing war crimes and things like that. What was the controversy?
The controversy was people, a lot of people investigated that picture, and the picture was credited to a wrong person.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow, I missed that. Oh my God.
Yes. And I forgot the news agent, not the agency, but the people who actually gave them award or something. They rescinded the award.
Wow.
Or something like that. I forgot what the term was really important, right? Whether they rescinded or whether they made correction. I don't know. I forgot the term, but it was big. It was big.
Yeah, because that photographer was very notable. I can't remember his name right now, but
Interesting. Yeah. So, and the photographer who got credited, he became from the Seventh agency. It was pretty, I think, don't quote me, but I think, I think it was part of the very elite photographers group. Right. That's really interesting. I'll have to look into that. Yeah, and they actually did some research, like at the angle, the kind of camera, how did it, and they kind of look at with the AI, with the time lapse, what is the if this guy like how fast they walk, that it's not impossible that he could be at that position to take that picture because he was there. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, I know what I'm doing after this talk. I definitely missed that. That was not what I thought. That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, that just shows the technology nowadays too, that we, like news agencies and other sort of like watchdog, whatever agencies have, because the fact that they were able to map that out from something that happened in like the late 60s. I think there's a human element too, like about, well, you have to watch. I think it's on Netflix too. You have to watch that investigation, and you could be either way, you could either pro or cons, whether it's right or wrong. So, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. Yeah, 100%. I feel like there's a lot of controversies over the years around like photojournalism and like who actually took the photo, and also what is photojournalism, right? Like what even is, like, do citizen journalists, which is a fraught term because citizen is a fraught term, but like do non-professional journalists count in taking some of these major images and videos of our times? I mean, if you think just George Floyd, for example, I mean, exactly, that horrific image was, speaking of starting or ending wars, started a whole social movement, protest movement. That was some of the largest protests that the U.S. had seen. And that wasn't the traditional photojournalist. Right. But I think down the road, she was even given some journalism awards just because there's this malleability around what journalism and photojournalism is, which I think is the interesting thing about it. Even if it makes it challenging sometimes too for like the industry, I think that's what makes it interesting. Right. Yeah, I think we're going to. I have a specific question about that, but I'm going to bring it up later. Okay, so people are saying that for journalism is in trouble, right? Because of the social media, because of the AI, because of the like you mentioned about, now everybody can produce news, right? Everybody can produce stories. Everybody can inform each other of what's going on. It's so easy with the cell phone, with even with the telephone, right? Now we have a cell phone with the social media, with text, with images. Things can get spread out so quickly to a lot of people, without requiring it to be printed on a newspaper. Mm-hmm. So, other than those problems, do you see other problems that journalism is facing right now? Yeah, and in fact, I appreciate and completely agree that technology has definitely played a role in, challenging the industry of journalism as it traditionally once was, but I'm always a little hesitant of, the term, it's called like technodeterminism, like it's sort of crediting all of these issues to technology, because I think it eclipses larger systems that have always been around, right? And so I think it comes down to, in the US context, a lot of the times are sort of the capitalistic structures that often contradict and are incompatible with what journalism claims to be in the US context, right? Journalism, claims to be for the people, a public good, something that it is beyond any sort of corrupting pressures or economic pressures, because the goal is to serve the people, because we have to bolster democracy and so on and so forth, and represent communities and things like that. But all of these, journalism isn't in a vacuum. It exists within the economic and social context that it lives in. And so, I think over the years, since going back to, 2000s, there has been a reckoning in a sense of how capitalistic pressures in this era of neoliberal capitalism, late stage capitalism, whatever you want to talk about it, to name it or whatever, have eroded journalism and have, caused so many news outlets to close, people to gut their staffs, to have less focus on deeper reporting, or maybe less reporting that's seen as less important, but is just as important to connecting to communities.
different beats and desks being shut down and things like that. And a lot of this can be sort of attributed to these capitalist incentives and impulses that are about, making money, having to sustain yourself within this, economic system in order to survive at all, which is, what we're seeing in Pittsburgh, obviously, but all across the US. And so, yeah, I think technology is a piece of that, but I think technology is also part of the sort of economic, political, social systems, right, that are bigger than some of these technical evolutions.
So I think for me, the issues are already there, or they are creeping towards a bigger problem, and technology often just expedites it.
Yeah.
Right. Just makes it more apparent. Makes it okay. Let's get it there now.
Yeah.
Probably just like I remember in the late 2000s when the photography becomes digital. Right. Everybody, usually in the past that people had to think before they took a picture because they only had 10 rolls, for example, in their bag, right? So they're only like 360 pictures. Now they shoot thousands, right? They just, it's just kind of embarrassing sometimes, when people, because I take pictures too, when people just like press the button, like, hopefully one captures.
Of the 1,000 photos, yes.
Hopefully one of the picture will capture the person not blinking, right? Right. So yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think it's a really good point. Technology amplifies, it accelerates, it reveals existing patterns and trends that are happening. I know I take a slightly different lens, but a similar type of argument in my dissertation where I talk about how moments of crisis or whatever accelerate, but they don't bring a new problems likely. It's usually amplifying existing ones or, changing them in a certain way. And I think technology does it similarly. We had, like you talked about digital cameras, then we had social media, which was a big revolution in a sense, right? And, it became a news technology. And then big tech, consolidating, got bigger and bigger and started to, take money from news outlets and, push traffic towards their sites. And now that's being dealt with as a problem. And now AI. And so it is like a snowball that keeps snowballing. But it's still on the same slope, if my metaphor makes sense, right? Yeah. It's still on those same conditions and structures,
Okay, now since you already mentioned that, so let's get into that. The social media and AI, right? So are they going to kill journalism or are they going to enhance journalism?
Since I have my background in academia, I never say yes or no. It's complicated.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's always complicated.
You passed the test. Yeah.
I have been well trained, and it is always complicated. I think AI really too soon to tell. There's some promises about it might speed up some workflow, but also, it can write similar news articles and do the research that journalists do. But, we're already like 10 years, 20 years into the craft of what journalism is supposed to be being eroded, right? Being dismissed and undervalued by its own industry. Like, right. You're going to pay a journalist full time, very, very low wages, then, what are you even valuing about the craft of journalism itself, right? Social media, it's a toughie because I think it was really great in sort of getting information out there, information quickly during crises so that journalists could pick up on it and like cover it and amplify it even more. And it was this really great sort of back and forth going on. But as these big tech companies have kind of gone so big, they've had a lot more controls on what people see in really meaningful ways. Social media is so ubiquitous. Everyone's on something and the algorithm is very much controlled. It can be censored, and we've seen a lot of big tech shift in a very specific political way. And they've been shown to censor things. And so I think you have this problem of the open public square that social media promised to be is definitely no longer the case. And so what does that mean if we're relying on it, especially journalism as an industry, for, sharing information or finding information? What does that mean for what is covered and what is seen? I'm not sure. I don't have the answers. I wish I did.
Yeah. So I think yeah, like you said that people have been saying it forever, but it's still around. Just like exactly when they said about, oh yeah, the digital camera is going to ruin photographers. No, they're still photographers.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, probably the number is. I mean, now you have to redefine what photographers.
Right. Yeah.
What are they? Right. So just like you mentioned about the journalistic piece. Does it have to be printed on the newspaper? No. Does it have to be written in a certain way? No, right? So it's getting bigger. It's getting more, it's getting more inclusive.
Yes.
Right? And whatever you want to define it, whatever you want to show it, express it. And if there's a taker, if there's a client, if there's a customer for it, then it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So, having said that, do you think that a blogger or like a Substack author or documentary author or whatever, can they call themselves journalists?
Yeah. Actually, that's why I think journalism is really interesting. I think it's a work that has never been formalized as a profession, right? Like you don't go to med school and you don't have a license, you don't go to the bar, you go to journalism school, but you don't have to go to journalism school, right? It is sort of like soft boundaries in that way. And I think that's what makes it really exciting. I think people can call themselves journalists. I mean, people call themselves whatever they like. I think there are core parts of journalism that go beyond what a traditional news article or photo is, right? This sort of corroborating facts, fact-checking, having sources, trying to get the best information possible and definitely investigating it to a certain way. Try to keep yourself not having conflicts of interest if you can, depending on some level. And I think there's core features that can go into a lot of different realms. Mm-hmm. And I think, with bloggers and citizen journalists and things like that, I think it's a positive evolution for journalism because in the US, journalism for a long time, very white male type of demographic doing this work. And we have seen throughout the years that there have been historical harms committed towards many communities of color in the US by journalism that journalism has been reckoning with. And I think that opening this up and people having more access to technology, they can tell their own stories and report on their communities that are underserved or ignored or have been maligned over decades. I think that's a positive thing. And I think journalism overall has been trying to reckon with these missteps, these wrongs, however you want to characterize it. And I remember during 2020, the big thing was sort of looking at objectivity, which is supposed to be this core norm of journalism that you center around, right? It goes back to the scientific revolution and things like that. And objectivity is supposed to be, something that keeps journalists. But what are the roots behind objectivity? And what does objectivity encourage? And what lenses does it lean towards and whose perspectives does it close off? That was something that was discussed a lot during 2020 and how, it was harmful, particularly to Black communities and in discussing police brutality. And so I think journalism, it hasn't quite grappled with it, but it's been trying to grapple with how some of the norms that it relies on are not perfect.
Right.
And they can be harmful.
And could it be because the balance is hard as a journalist, as a publisher, whether you need to cover something because the viewers wants to see it or you want them to see it, right? Mm-hmm. So who's the decider, right? Mm-hmm. Because the customers, they would rather see sports. They don't want to see brutality, right? Yeah. So what do you say about that? So what is the right balance? I mean, now, as from the journalist perspective, from academic perspective, and probably from the publisher perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a publisher, so it's hard to know how they weigh all those things. But you've been dealing with them for the past 2 years. Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of them, and it's certainly a hard thing to balance. I think another thing I find interesting about the norms and culture, professional culture around journalism is like newsworthiness, like something that is news. It's almost kind of like that one justice who talks about pornography and says, I know it when I see it. But when you really press on it, it gets it unravels pretty quickly sometimes, I feel. And so what is newsworthy? Like, yeah, sure, sports, if someone's winning a game in your city or, some politician does something, but the sort of what's going on in smaller events that happen in communities, when is that news? When is something news and when is something not news? And when it comes to balancing what you like to show audiences and what you think audience want to see, I think that's become incredibly difficult with the social media, with the sort of economic constraints that a lot of news organizations are operating under. And while I say that a lot of these norms, like newsworthiness, what exactly is it, can be fraught, I also feel like they still do something in terms of not pushing news outlets to just do what they think audiences want and sort of trying to take a more holistic view to think what is something they might need for the public to be informed about something, to be able to get to work easier, to be able to vote better, or vote more easily because they have X, Y, and Z information. And so I think news outlets try to hit that balance. I mean, I don't know how they do it. It's not an easy one, but you have those pressures on either side, though. This sort of public good, try to do towards the public good, public service, and the realities of you have to serve the audience so the audience comes back.
Right, and then plus a new parameter, not new, but another parameter that now you have that and somebody pays for it.
Right, exactly.
Then he's going to compensate it, and you can actually earn a living doing those things, right? And that's when the subscription matters, right? Or then we know by having a subscription means that you have to know what they want to see, right? But when you know what they want to see, that sometimes what would you want them to see is not aligned with what they want to see, right? And same with the advertisers, right?
Yeah. I also feel like there's tools now where you can see exactly what. So I think they're talking about this at this lecture. This guy works for the AP and does all their AI product stuff. And there's different tools that really can, AI or not, track what your subscriber looks at on the website. So you can get really detailed information about what they want to see, what they clicked on, what they read, how much they read of it versus what they didn't. And I imagine it would be challenging to not be like, well, how do we keep them? This article seems they like this topic.
And then the more challenging part is for the non-subscribers, right? Because as subscribers, you already have that echo chamber, right? If you just continue satisfying those subscribers, right? You want more subscribers. How can you attract the white space, right? As opposed to just this, right? And anybody has a solution?
Yeah, I know, right? I know. It sounds like there's been a sort of slow move away just relying on the subscriber model. People do it, obviously, but sort of thinking of trying to get donors of certain types. Not, maybe there's like a private individual, anonymous even donor who, gives a hefty sum
we don't need another Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah, not a billion, not the benevolent billionaire. But then there's the foundations and stuff like that, trying to pull together different revenue sources. But it's just kind of like a Band-Aid. Overall, it's a hard problem to truly fix and to truly gain that sustainability. And I worry about that. I mean, I think it's a real problem for this industry, and it's not a secret either. Yeah.
So you mentioned about the nonprofit having a different financial model. So I mean, case in point, we have Post Gazette, right? Now with the I don't remember, Ventriculus Institute from Maryland,
yes,
right?
Ventriculus.
Something like that.
I haven't got the pronunciation. I think Ventriculus, something. Yes.
Right, and then CD Paper by the Local Matters, right? So, so getting absorbed by nonprofits, right? Probably you can say, yeah. So, but then are they actually solving their problems, or they just kick the can down the road?
Yeah, that is also a very good question. I don't know if it's kick the can down the road. I would lean towards that. I feel like there is something promising about moving towards nonprofit, moving towards things that are, journalist owned or worker owned or community owned, certain different models that are, that are departing from the for-profit typical news outlet. I think it's exciting to explore those. I think it's important to explore those. But nonprofits still have to sustain themselves, right? And a lot of nonprofits launch and they last a couple of years and have to close because they can't sustain. and, relying on foundations that, they're great and generous and things like that, but they can kind of pick where they want their money to go, right? That's like the whole thing. And things can change. And so thankfully, I've seen in the past 5 years, there's a lot of interest in funding initiatives that are supporting journalism because there's a widespread recognition it's in crisis, right? And I think that's good for now. I don't know what happens in a later stage, right? Because I think the crisis can only be used to get people to, donate or fund, big donors, whatever, for so long until they're like, hey, did we fix it? Did we, so it's a challenging thing, but at the same time, there's so many people looking at this problem and thinking about different ways of approaching it.
But they've been looking at the problem for 20 years.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
So has there been, can you say that the problem still exists and people do not have the solution in the US market or probably in the world market? Mm-hmm. Can you say that?
I think the solution is it's a problem with so many different complexities, facets, conditions, because the US is
and
big.
It keeps on changing, right? Because right now AI is new,
mm-hmm.
right? And it just throws a gigantic wrench into the machine.
Yeah, 100%. And I think crisis is honestly a bad way to frame what the journalism industry is going through, because crisis implies a beginning and an end, right? there is you had a crisis, that a war hopefully had a beginning and an end. There's a sense of boundedness that I think an industry like this in crisis doesn't in trouble like this. See, I use the word crisis because it's so easy to use, but I think that word sort of distorts how we respond and talk about it and think about what's actually a solution. You know what I mean? Because I don't know if it's something that can be totally resolved.
Yeah, probably it's not a crisis, but it's an evolution of being, mm-hmm. It's just transforms into something else.
Yeah.
Right. So do you think that journalists or journalism, as a thing, as an entity, that they trying to hold on to the old definition, mm-hmm. The good old days, the golden age of mm-hmm. journalism? Are they still clinging that, please don't transform into something else?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there is definitely part of that, and for good reason. I mean, there's certain practices and norms and ways of collecting information, synthesizing, doing investigations, and packaging it in some ways. I mean, there's evolutions with that too, that are valuable and are reliable, and that delivers important information to communities. At the same time, I think people are either embracing the change and trying to do different things, embracing social media, whatever, or getting dragged along whether they want to be or not. Yeah. But, some of the stuff that you're clinging to, some of the core fundamentals of journalism, what it wants to be, I think is important in an era awash with misinformation. Now you have AI-generated misinformation with bots, with, politicians and everyone just lying all the time, And so I think, and that journalism itself is under attack frequently. Journalists and media outlets are, framed as enemies or all bad or all liars and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you have that backdrop to it, there's something to trying to embrace change, but also not falling victim to letting go some of the principled parts of journalism that I think makes it special.
Right. So with this PMP, the Pittsburgh Media Partnership, that mm-hmm. you've been involved for the past 2 years?
Actually, I got here in the fall. You just feel like you know me well, which I really appreciate it. We just get along super well. But I've only been here since the fall, which is crazy. It's been fast.
All right. So you guys have 40 plus members. Mm-hmm. So is it still a news desert or not? 40 is kind of a lot. Yeah, it's great you mentioned that, because when the Post-Gazette announced that it was going to close, which it didn't, a lot of national pieces are written about how Pittsburgh's now a news desert. And so we, worked with Press Forward and Fifth Influence mm-hmm. to start an awareness campaign that's on social media that's literally 40 newsrooms at work every day for you. To sort of try to remind people who come across these ads, hopefully, that, hey, there's a bunch of different news outlets and media outlets that
can serve different needs for you within the region, within your city, and to show people what else is out there. And so, yeah, I think news deserts itself is a very fraught term. It sort of relies on absence, but sometimes there is an outlet, but there's one person there and they, are not doing much reporting because they don't have the ability to do it. And so I think trying to get away from that term in general is probably for the best, but hey, they still use it about Pittsburgh. But I wouldn't say Pittsburgh's a news desert. I think, obviously it'd be great to have all the amazing outlets here be even more robust because they're doing great work. But once again, it comes down to those tough constraints economically that sort of plague the industry. And yeah, that's the awareness campaign.
Yeah,
scroll
I'm
down
showing
a
the
little bit,
audience now.
maybe. Yeah, I kind of want it as a T-shirt. Kind of fun.
Yeah, so
It's very Steel City look. Yeah. I think it'd be a fun T-shirt, but I want to pick, the outlets because they change on the microphones so that everyone can be represented in the partnership.
There will be a lot,
Yeah.
40 of them, so
That's already a lot of microphones there. But yeah,
exactly.
it's been a cool campaign. I know I've seen it on my social media feed, but I'm probably the targeted audience, and so I liked it and I keep seeing it. But the campaign has reached like 1 million accounts or folks across Spotify, Instagram, and Meta. I guess that's Meta. Spotify, Meta, and LinkedIn or something. And so it's a wide-reaching social media campaign, but awareness, if it works, is the first step. And I know a lot of different outlets are doing community engagement work and things like that. And so there's a lot to do in terms of reaching people. And obviously the Post-Gazette's back, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't continue that work.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's going to be fully operational, right? I heard that probably it's just the assets are taken, but I don't know.
I heard that they plan to hire back most of the journalists, if not good. All or most of the staff, I think. I'm hoping that's the case because there's a lot of great journalists there. Right. Obviously, the folks who were in the guild and had to go through all of those issues for years and then came back and then it was immediately closed as soon as they came back. It would be nice to finally have something settle in that regard. I mean, I know they still have litigation with the Block family who own the Post-Gazette. But yeah, I think that's where they're moving at the moment. But yeah, we don't know yet. I mean, their plan is not to stop publishing, to have an interruption, and they were supposed to close early May. So
right.
Fingers crossed.
All right. So one thing that I have been wondering, like in other industries or probably in the technology area or probably even finance or banking. So whenever there are financial problems, when they're doing something that they cannot afford to do, right? One of the solution is to have merchant acquisition, right? People like combining, but I haven't seen that here in Pittsburgh for the newsrooms, right? Sure, right now we see other people or a new entity being built, like Local Matters, right? Getting a city paper, right? And this Maryland-based nonprofit buying Post-Gazette. But do you see that probably from the academic perspective that why is it not happening? Why aren't newsrooms trying to merge?
That's a really interesting question. One thing I want to say first is I agree. I think from what I understand, and I've been, trying to make sure I have a sense of all the ownership structures of those in our partnership and otherwise. Yeah, the mergers acquisitions aren't really happening within the city proper. Now in the region, Southwestern PA, you have Gannett for sure around. You have smaller chains that have come from in the state and acquired from families who would own newspapers. And there's several examples of this. And so it is interesting to think about why maybe there's less of that in the city proper, but you're seeing it regionally and obviously around the U.S. I think people within the city aren't, like newsrooms aren't merging and things like that. I don't know. I think it's a good question. I think people have the newsrooms we have are quite distinct in a lot of ways. Some of them serve very specific niches and communities. And I don't know, there's this pride, there's this passion, there's this identity investment that people have in not only journalism, but in the specific outlet that they have been a part of. I know a lot of my dissertation work was sort of talking about this passion paradox where you invest so much of yourself in it, but it's just constantly designed to kind of draw it out of you, in a lot of ways, because there's so much insecurity and there's so much pressure and stress. And so I think that's part of it. I mean, I know, City Paper coming back, I believe a lot of the people who were there before are, rejoining and things like that because they love City Paper. And City Paper is a very specific brand of vibe, and you make friends with the people you work with all the time. And so I think that there's a lot of passion and identity investment behind journalists. I don't think it's definitely not unique to this profession, but it's definitely maybe more than some other professions. And I think the pro of that is that, you'll keep these outlets alive as much as you can, serve communities as much as you can, do the work as much as possible. But the con is sometimes something isn't viable, unfortunately, or sometimes the cost to yourself maybe isn't worth it in the end. And it's hard to find that moment because people really do give themselves a lot to this work. But I think that's part of it. I think it's pride, stubbornness, and passion. Yeah, passion. I don't mind. I mean, more the merrier, But
I think when you collaborate with someone, and then your passion has to be, measured,
right?
Compromised.
Exactly.
Right. So, what is PMP's role in this, right? Because you are, you I think probably trying to be a glue or something, right? So. Is it just to share utility, share some boring task, or like what's your goal, and how do you manage to get that? How you measure yourself?
Yeah, I think right now the Pittsburgh Media Partnership is kind of this sort of connecting point. It's this spot that brings together a big node on a big network, right? We're an ecosystem. There's a bunch of things, and we're trying to bring everyone together. Just to talk about the shared challenges and, possibilities that we have if we come together, because, news outlets, they aren't facing these challenges in a vacuum or alone. Like a lot of them share similar challenges. And so one of the sort of bigger things that PMP does is it allows people to come in conversation and to meet face to face and think about these issues differently. We also try to do some support with our newsroom, with our two reporters right now, Hannah and Aaron, who do different stories that maybe other newsrooms aren't focused on to produce work that they can republish. And we also provide interns for the summer so that we fund those interns so that they can have, a young reporter in their newsroom to help support their work and do a bunch of different type of research sharing support for collaborations and things like that. But I think overall, the goal is to sort of think of us as an ecosystem altogether. Obviously, there's still competition. Obviously, there's still, you're trying to compete for certain parts of the market, for advertisers. Those things don't go away. But when you think of it bigger than just one newsroom, I think there's a collective power there that we could use towards different things in the future. I think that's a really powerful thing. And I don't know of any other markets that have something like this that really does bring people together regularly across a region who are involved with journalism.
That's actually my next question, that if anybody else in the US or anywhere else doing the same thing. Because I think in the beginning of PMP, many years ago, I remember that Philly had Resolve Philly, right? So what is the difference between Resolve Philly and PMP?
Yeah, I think there's different other projects. And then I think there's stuff in Denver that bring, and sort of regional projects too, that bring together maybe 5 or 6 different outlets, or if they're public media outlets and things like that. But I think maybe the Pittsburgh Media Partnership is a little bit more explicit with just we are a connector. We bring folks together and we're doing X, Y, and Z things to practically support certain work.
Right, just for people to convene.
Right. And also to have these sort of resources and practical supports for them. And as a support system versus trying to change what they're doing in any sort of specific ways. We want to support what they're already doing and help move that forward in any way we can. I also feel like our structure being under the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University, I believe that's different from Resolve Philly, unless it's tied to Temple. I think it's if I recall correctly. But the university affiliation is helpful because that's another sort of form of support where we have different resources we can access through the university that we can bring to the partnership, and also have that partnership with the university, not just Point Park, but more broadly, is something that the industry has been looking at in different nonprofits as well, and sort of building out what journalism and what news outlets who they work with, and what sort of partnerships can exist. And I think having that university involved with our work is an asset. And I don't know if other outlets do, initiatives similar to this do that. And I can't think of many that are doing exactly what we're doing, if any, actually. But we want to bring them, we want people to do it. I know there's, we're hoping that maybe other places look at our model and try to do something similar.
Or probably other cities or other other regions do not have as many foundations that will provide grants. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Pittsburgh has all this AI this, AI that, robotics this, robotics that. So it is their biggest drive right now, right? So is PMP planning to collaborate with them?
Oh, interesting. I think probably not from what I see right now. I get the sense from our members that, there is an interest in AI, of course, because it's everywhere and everyone's talking about it in every realm, every profession. And I think we'll probably do some workshops or different events that give the foundations for that. And maybe there's some tools that would make sense for them to learn, or even just understanding exactly what it is and how it can be applied right now in our industry. But I think there's also a very healthy skepticism that I endorse, and I don't think we would be partnering with those folks unless they wanted to shell out some funds for us to test something of their tool for them. Maybe that would be interesting, but even then, Okay, I'm not sure.
So I think I'm sensing a lot of skepticism.
Yeah.
So why? I mean, let's go
skepticism.
There. So why? I mean, what is from your perspective, as a PMP as well as an academic, right? What is an acceptable use of AI in this work?
Yeah, I mean, that is, once again, here I do the academic caveat. It's complicated.
Probably also mentioned in the Keystone. I don't know, probably just a workshop.
I think it keeps coming up, and I went to a lecture, I mentioned this earlier, where he works at AP, does AI product development and things with them, other tech development with them. And I asked him, I was like, well, we have the social media revolution and the internet revolution, whatever you want to call it, both those things. And then journalism's kind of like, oh man, nowadays we're like, oh, big tech, man, they're scamming us, and we shouldn't have given our stuff away for free, and we should have operated differently, and now we're in a worse spot than we might have been if we'd acted differently at first. And so, or even embraced it totally different. And it was just kind of accepted and worked with, and we were like, yay, social media. And so I asked, well, how do we know we're not doing that with AI? Like, how do we know if this new revolution of technology is happening, and we're just like, all right, time to embrace it and figure out how to implement it into our workflow and X, Y, and Z? How do we know we're not doing a similar thing where it ends up an adverse thing to sustainability, ends up undermining the craft and work of journalism more? How do we know this? And so I keep that hesitancy because, this is a technology that, takes content from other places, models off them, which is not great sometimes, obviously. And then it can produce similar work to what journalists do, arguably. And so I don't know. I think there's some other parts of AI with sort of the back end of the news production, or even sort of early research or brainstorming, that I think it could be fine to use. But then you sort of, if you can get into sort of ethical constraints of using AI. I mean, some of these companies have problematic partnerships with the Department of War, and then they have maybe environmental impacts and other sort of social wrongs that we don't want to continue with, like how AI generated imagery is used of women and girls and other people, and I don't know. So it's a big question with a lot of things you have to weigh out for yourself, and I don't know how the news industry does that well, but I hope we learn the lessons of other technological disruptions and maybe take them forward when we're doing this. This is a big one. AI is a big one. Yeah. So it's a tough one. And I just worry that it will be adopted, and maybe there'll be regrets in 10 years, or there won't be. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's really in the thick of it right now.
Right. And we do not have humanoids yet. So.
I watched Terminator 2. Oh my God. I wish it was that interesting. I mean, when the AI stuff first came out, when there was like different podcasts from like credible journalists being like, oh my God, I think it might have sentience. I was like, guys, please. Life is not it's cool, but it's not as cool as that. We're not.
Not yet. Not yet.
It's not Terminator 2. I wish though.
All right. Great. It's been great chatting with you, knowing more about, Dr. Sybert and as well as the PMP and journalism in a general way or specific way to Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for letting me nerd out about journalism with you. We were, as we said earlier, I have a lot of thoughts, and it was really nice to be able to just rant freely. So thank you for having me to talk.
This is a ranting space.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
Come on down. All right.
It's great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.